But my practical use for intuition is in the moment. I have to say, am I okay right now? Is this okay right now? Am I going to be fine? Is this person's intention as well? Is it okay, even if this person's intentions feel off, for me to go on this ride with this person or this
Mm.
friendship? Is there something detrimental or something doesn't go my way? I was like, is this for the better? Am I okay? So I check in all the time.
Welcome to the Soulful Sound Podcast, where you will find conscious, inspiring content to support your healing and transformation. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I want to extend a heartfelt invitation for you to be part of our community, where more insightful conversations await to guide you to heal, grow, and thrive. Simply click the subscribe button. It means the world to me. Your support, your comments, everything is truly incredible. And we're only at the beginning of this awesome journey together. I'm so excited to be on this adventure with you, and your subscription is a valuable part of making it all happen. Thank you so much for joining, sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are. Welcome back, everyone, to a new episode on the Soulful Sound Podcast. I am joined by the awesome Happy Ali, who is the author of the Intuition Bible, How and Why to Tap into Your Inner Wisdom. Happy's spiritual journey began in 1995 when he dedicated his life to the exploration of metaphysical disciplines after a near-death experience inspired a dramatic awakening. And now Happy teaches and shares the subconscious manifestation methodology all around the world. And I can't wait to dive in. Welcome in, Happy. So lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah.
And I still can't believe that I've been on this journey since 1995. It feels like I have friends that were born years later. So
Yes.
it's been a long journey.
Yes, it
And
often is. It often is, whether that's conscious or not, right? It's really beautiful.
well, I was 17 at the time, so it was cool that I started early, and now I'm 46. So it's been a fun life.
Yeah, sounds that way. And I love to ask my guests right off the bat, like, I mean, you've written a book about intuition. There's so much yumminess in there that I want to pull from, but I'd love to know a little bit about your journey, whatever you feel called to share that brought you to where you are now. And I know that can be like a conversation on its own. So you decide where you want to take us on that personal journey to where you are now.
So the best way that I can describe my work in general is about going within. For example, my first book was Charisma Within, How to Enhance Your Inner Magnetism in 15 different methods. And this one is about going within, and everything I teach is about going within because I really believe that all the information that you need in your life is inside of you, and the one resource you can always count on is inside of you. And after I had my near death experience in 95, I was downloaded a lot of information that seemed to be, at the time, I didn't know what it was, or it didn't make sense because I was one person one day and then full of information and knowledge and wisdom the next day. And it
Mm.
wasn't such a departure from who I was. It was just a lot more of who I was, plus something greater. And I had proof now that there was something more. And, faith, people say, hey, you have so much faith. I said, well, it's not really faith when you already know. Faith is when you believe in something blindly and you know that it is, and you just have faith in it. But
Mhm.
I haven't had faith since 2000, no, well, 1995, because I know the non-physical energetic world exists. I know I've had personal proof. And when you have that, having faith is like just believing and knowing. So back then, I was under the impression that I was here to help the world, save the world. And soon I realized that the world did not want saving, and that the best I could do was lead by example and just become more and more of who I was. And there was a tipping point in my life where I realized that just helping people one at a time by your sheer influence, which is what most people are here to do. You're here to uplift by being the best version of yourself. But there
Yes.
was a point where I realized that no, that was not my mission. And my mission was very clearly to uplift others on a larger scale,
Mm.
and that I had been talked out of my own truth by well-meaning individuals trying to get me not to be disappointed in life early on in life, saying, "Hey, that's too big of a dream," or "I think you're just making stuff up," you know. So my journey was finding a job that paid well, that used my creativity because I'm an artist. And I did that for a long time until, I had my children and I realized that, oh gosh, do I really want to be known as someone who paints faces? At the time I was painting faces as a makeup artist. And I decided to go back to school, but study science. And when I say science, I mean psychology, which is really art of the mind.
I love
It's
that.
really, I
Yeah.
got a BA, not a BS.
Hmm.
Um, and And I wanted to bring out more of a holistic approach to improving lives, which is understanding both sides of the coin, which is spirituality and science, because you can't ignore the other. It's if you want to live a full life, you have to acknowledge both sides of both sides of the coin, whether it's you know, positivity or negativity, or whether it's science or spirituality. There's duality in this world, and the best way to live a good life is to acknowledge both and find your balance in between. So that's kind of how my work started. And
Beautiful.
it keeps popping up. The stuff that I write, the stuff that I teach is none of it is intended. Like I don't sit there thinking, what am I going to do? Or what is it that I have to write? And when I do that, it just sits in a notebook somewhere. But
Mm.
when I get inspired and I just pull something out, it just a lot more comes out. It's like literally channeling information. And a lot of information comes out that I didn't actually know before.
Do you feel called to use your voice and sound in a healing capacity? Learn how to use your voice therapeutically to facilitate healing and well being. Whether you want to go deeper in your own healing, support family and friends, or build a thriving sound healing practice, this training is for you. This worldwide virtual training offers theory, practice, resources, and support on your path to becoming a qualified sound healer.
Mhm.
Or new like little snippets, but now it got fleshed out. So my
Mm.
work generally is pretty much inspired. Sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, where the heck did this come from? And then when I hear someone else talking about the exact same thing that I was just downloaded, I feel like there's some sort of verification or validation that, oh
Yeah.
my, yeah, okay, okay.
Reflection. It's come straight at you. I love that.
Well, like a big teacher will say so originally when I had my near-death experience, I came up with a book of how to feel better and how to change life, because the secret of happiness is perspective. And I wrote all these chapters about how to look at life differently. And then later I think Esther Hicks had a book of the Liberate Creation or something, and it was almost the exact same book.
Yeah.
And but it was, I was 26 or 28 at the time. And when I had the experience was 11 years ago. So
Yeah.
I thought, God, I wish I would have published it. So,
Yeah, exactly.
it's, you got to act fast when you get those ideas.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I very much resonate with that. I teach a lot about the inside out approach, your inner universe expressed in the outer world. So for me, my upbringing in a very spiritual and metaphysical background has always been looking within. So I really relate to that beautiful share. I actually have a question, and it's one that I don't think I've asked before, but I'm really curious because the way you're explaining it, I sense you have a beautiful communication in this. So we often hear, and I've used these words myself, I've had downloads, or these things have come through, this information has come through. And I know that a lot of people listening might have a sense of what that might be. I'm curious if we can break that down a little bit. What is the experience or your sensing landscape when you're having a download? So you said you kind of felt like one person, and then, all of a sudden there was so much more. And talk to me about that space.
So if you're talking specifically about the near-death experience, or are you talking about just in general when you have downloads?
Well, I don't mind which one you speak to, because you spoke to having both, one around the near-death experience and certainly in general.
I think for the sake of, if I wanted to validate my perspective, I would talk about the near death. But I think I want to help your viewers understand more. So I want to talk about regular downloads, the ones that you receive. And I think that's more relevant when it comes
Sure.
to just practical, you know? And first of all, I want to explain that every single human being has a different way of receiving downloads. And we all have different inner senses, just like we have outer senses. So people just call it the sixth sense, but the sixth sense is really just another five senses, but our inner senses. So you want to say we have 10 senses. You know, it's the outer vision, the inner vision,
Yeah.
everything has the outer feeling, the inner feeling.
Mm,
And each person will start out with a very strong, dominant inner sense. So mine is claircognizance and clairsentience, which means I receive thoughts
mhm,
and knowings, and I also receive feelings. So it's very related to my feelings and knowing.
mhm.
Others are clairvoyant. They see images and then they extract from the image what they saw. They'll have a vision. And a vision isn't like you just, have this thing where you see this moment. All of a sudden, some vision, something becomes clear, some idea, but it's visually translated in your mind. Or you hear someone say something in your ear. I don't know if it's true, but I would assume that musicians are clairaudient. They can hear a song before it's real. So and then
Mhm.
they kind of copy it, they create it. So I think different people have different skills, and that musicians are a great example of people who receive downloads because they're really receiving something,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. So the way to know if it's a download is if it comes as a full package. It's not like you don't have it like little bits at a time, and then you have to piece the puzzle together. Although life is a puzzle that you need to piece together, but a true
Mm,
download is one when you have like an instant insight
mm,
that's full. And then when you flesh the idea, you might even get more out of it, but the whole of it comes in full. So when you have an idea, it's not like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I did this? You get the idea, wouldn't it be great if I did this? And you get a lot of the idea along with it. And it's almost like being delivered a book instead of a single sentence.
Yeah.
And when we think more in sentences. We know kind of the sentence we're about to say and maybe what we're going to say next, but usually downloads come in full. Or feelings. Feelings are really interesting because it's hard to translate at first because it's just like a sensation in your body. And
Yeah.
unless you trained yourself to know what that sensation means, it's kind of like oh, I just got tingles or I got like a rash on my forehead or something. So it's really weird. And, being a claircognizant or clairsentient well, sentient, not so much, cognizant, the knowing is one of the harder ones, not because of what you receive, but what you can validate.
Mm,
Because it's so hard because you think you're making stuff up. Because you're like, oh, I just had like a pipe dream or I had a fantasy.
mhm,
But when you're a clairvoyant or an audient, you actually see something so clearly and so vividly that you can't argue with it so much. You could
mm,
say it's my imagination, but it's more easy for psychics, for example, which people that have psychic abilities, traditional psychic abilities, when people say that is when they have visions, it's not psychic abilities knowing, it's all of these are psychic. Um,
sure.
when they see a vision, when they see like a red locket, they were like, I see a red locket. But when you hear a red locket in your head, it's really different because you just have to be like, oh, am I just thinking about that red thing that I saw yesterday? So
Mm,
downloads in general they come in full and they come when you least expect it or when you've most trained it. So those are the two options.
yeah.
Generally, I always tell people if you want to download about something, ask your question, go about your life.
Yeah.
Forget about the answer. Don't sit there waiting for an answer. Wait,
Mhm.
and then when you're in the best possible frequency for that answer, it will come to you.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, they're sitting on the toilet or taking a bath. I mean,
Mhm.
so many people have shower downloads because our brains go into alpha and, we're not in beta. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to explain what beta and alpha is to your audience.
Yeah.
Your brain waves, oscillate at very different speeds. And when you're when you're looking at the world, social media and everything, your brain is going really fast. The waves are going very fast. When it slows down, like right before sleep, you go into alpha, and then right when you're starting to get the visions, you're into theta, which means the brain waves slow down.
Yeah.
And the information that comes from within obviously is not this intense, stimulated array of information that's coming in. It's a slower wave of frequency, and you have to match it to be able to receive it.
Yeah.
And when you're seeing things and you're distracted, you're actually shutting off your intuitive abilities, unless it's so loud, like a body sensation or a big vision. But generally, if your visual field is very, very occupied, you're not going to see the subtle visions that you get from the inner world. The inner worlds, the inner senses are so quiet compared to the outer senses. They they can shout, but they will be a fraction of what the outer senses are, because the outer senses are designed for your survival, and they can never overpower the inner. I mean, the inner senses can never overpower the outer senses. Then you might fall into a ditch and die.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So you do need to slow down the frequencies to receive.
Yes. Yeah. And I relate from the example of musician, my background, and I am very clairaudient if I had to say this is what's most present, but of course there's not like one necessarily that this is you, this is you. It's like we can experience many different things. And I think for me, the journey that my life has taken was from what I call a download. I was at the end of this very business oriented seminar. I went into the hotel room to get ready for the party before we all said goodbye, and something told me to click record on my phone, and I stared at myself in the mirror. Tears started to come down my face, and the lyrics of a song and melody of a song popped out. And it was just those, like you say, I was in that space where I looked into my soul rather than my physical appearance. I stared at myself in the mirror, and this just fell out. And it has really impacted the choices that I've made consciously thereafter, and how my life has shifted into sound healing and using sound as a healing modality. So I can completely relate to that. And I want to talk about the intuition, because you already are talking about it. And I want to frame it a little bit. So let's talk about that piece, because I know this is a lot of your work as well, that inner wisdom, looking within. So what is your, let's say, definition of intuition, if there is one for you?
Well, I do have my own definition, and it's different than the dictionary's definition. Well, I guess it kind of goes with it. It's the dictionary says it's, whatever you receive that's not related to the logical mind, which is really, it's not logical. It's an information that comes from within. But people have a very limited view of what intuition is. They think of it as a gut feeling, or just or I just kind of knew that. So that's kind of what people think of as intuition, when they just kind of knew something. When I tell people I wrote a book on intuition, they're like, "Oh, mine is great." And I say, "Okay, which version of it is great?" And it's usually the gut feelings or whatever. But intuition to me is anything, which I'm going to repeat the dictionary basically, but my version of it is any information that comes from your physical or ethereal body or energetic body that is not logical, and it was not something that the brain conjured up, even though the brain does have to translate it, by the way.
Yes.
But it didn't originate from that. And there's a lot of gray area, because thoughts don't originate in the brain anyway, but it's not your primary frequency. Now, to fully understand where intuition comes from, you have to understand the multi-dimensional aspect of reality. You are multidimensional. You have a conscious mind, you have a subconscious mind, you have an entire world, a brain that's functioning everywhere. You have your heart brain, you have your stomach brain. There's so many different layers of you that you have access to. And that's the most superficial layer and very important version of reality. Now, people know what AI is. AI is basically a system that has been fed all the data that they have in the world, that's collected digitally, and they created a supercomputer that can use all that stuff and think really fast. Now, our
Mhm.
subconscious is much like AI because it has been storing information that we're unaware of since the moment of birth and prior to birth, but we're going to just stick to birth till now. So every
Mhm.
moment we get about a little bit under a couple of millions of data, bits of data that comes into our, system. We absorb that, but our conscious mind only can process about 150 something or 140 something, or some people even say less or more, but let's say 100 and something, which means around 2 million bits of data is going to us through us, stored by us, unacknowledged by the conscious mind. Now, this stuff, think of it as this stuff is being programmed in your computer your entire life. And that's just one moment of it, 1 second of it. And how long you've lived, multiply that with how many seconds you've lived. Now, the AI aspect of you, I'm going to use that because it's the first time I've ever used that term. The subconscious aspect of you is aware of all this information. And when you're looking out, it can see stuff that you can't see. It's aware of your entire visual field. It's aware of your body language that I might not be aware of. It's aware of so much. It's aware of your desires, where you've been, where you're going, all this stuff. So when you learn to tap into that the lowest level, like the most superficial level, your subconscious for help making decisions, you're going to tap into this vast library of knowledge that's within you. And now that's going not even woo woo. Okay. So that's just going very like basic idea. But so that's one layer of intuition you have access to. But we are energetic beings. We are not this physical being, including the subconscious, is just a sliver of who we are. So that conscious mind is a sliver of the subconscious. Now, the subconscious is a sliver of who we are as souls, as beings, as part of the creator. And guess what? Our bodies don't stop at this body. It goes, the galaxy, the universe is our body. And we are an atom within that body. And we have access to everything. Now you can go out as far as the universe, the physical, or you can go into the multidimensional reality of all the dimensions that exist. But you are part of all of that.
Mhm.
And the funny part is all you got to go is to go within and figure out what resource you want to access. And this resource that you can access is unlimited,
Yeah.
not bound by space and time. You can look into the future, you can look into the past, you can look into alternate timelines. You can even see if I make this decision, how will the outcome be? That's such a really helpful tool to have. I I,
Yeah.
I think I use my intuition a lot now because I'm a prophetic dreamer. I have prophetic dreams. I dream things anywhere from 2.5 months in advance to the day of. And in the morning, or sometimes I'm sleeping and I get a text or a call and I get to read it in the dream, and I wake up to the text and I've already read it.
Mhm.
And so I have this, what people call a gift, which we all do. We just haven't honed it yet. And that's my accidental version of like that non-intentional way of receiving information that has been
Mhm.
very helpful in my life. But my practical use for intuition is in the moment. I have to say, am I okay right now? Is this okay right now? Am I going to be fine? Is this person's intention as well? Is it okay, even if this person's intentions feel off, for me to go on this ride with this person or this
Mhm.
friendship? Is there something detrimental or something doesn't go my way? I was like, is this for the better? Am I okay? So I check in all the time. And
Yeah.
it, it's kind of like having this wise friend that kind of can see the future and knows everything. And it's always trying to talk to you, but you keep shushing it.
Mhm.
It's like your parents back in the day when you were really young and they knew all the stuff that you needed to do. And you were like, no, I know what I'm talking about. And that's kind of how it is because it has your best interest at heart, but it just needs you to shut up for a minute to listen to it. But I get guidance. Like I'll wake up in the morning when the stakes are high. Sometimes in life, the stakes are low. Sometimes in life, the stakes are high. And those are times that if you wake up in the middle of the night, it's hard to go back to sleep because your
Mhm.
mind is just racing. And I'll do that exercise. I'll do a bunch of different exercises. I'll be like, okay, am I going to be okay? Okay. Am I going to be, should I worry about this? Should I not worry about this? Is this person? And I'll go through the questions until I'm calm. And then, but I look for real answers, not like I'm t talking myself out of. So you can say everything's going to be fine. Life is good. There's nothing you've overcome before that you can't overcome again. That's affirmations.
Affirmation, yeah.
This is different. This is, I'm checking in. I'm like, am I going to be okay? Okay, good. Am I going to do this? Okay. Am I, do I have to worry about anything? No. Okay. Then I feel like, okay, my friend just hugged me, gave me a kiss and a hug and comforted me, and I go back to sleep. So
Mm.
that's like the best version of my version of intuition. But I talk to my dead family, in my dreams or sometimes in my waking time. There's so many, I get downloads, gut feelings, directions, dead family, communication, premonitions. There's so many different versions, and I try to teach as much of it as I can in my book.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that. And I like that you have some like very practical questions for checking in, because I think it's very nuanced what you shared, and I kind of want to reflect it outward is that yes, sometimes we have the okay, I'm okay, talking yourself off the ledge and let's say all the positive things and hope I feel better, which is not the same as really sensing in and checking in and being okay with no, I'm not okay, or actually right now, and then keep sensing until you get to that place where the answer, is what it really needs to be in the moment.
I've had moments, ever since law of attraction became a big thing, like having a negative feeling has been so frowned upon. And for me, when I had my near-death experience, it was all about changing in perspective so you can be happy. So there
Mhm.
was this misconception that you can't cry or you shouldn't cry or you shouldn't go through sadness. And sometimes I check in and I feel sad, and the message I get is cry it out,
Yeah.
cry it out. If you cry it out with awareness that you're a human being that needs to cry, you're not going to get anything bad coming at you. But if you cry it out thinking the world is over and your life's over, that's without awareness. That's being in the ego. Then you can manifest bad things in your life and you perpetuate the cycle. But
Yeah.
the human emotion is really important, especially because the more you learn the different aspects of the human emotion, the more you can be more intuitive because intuition does come from the body most of the time.
Yeah, and when I talk about emotion myself, and I speak about it as energy in motion, and if energy is moving in you and you're not experiencing it in a way that feels comfortable, then you need to move it. And the moving happens through many different ways, crying being one of them. And I think that's really important to acknowledge because I know that it's also frowned upon from you're weak when you cry, you're weak when you're vulnerable. And I have three kids, but two boys, and I remember very much really wanting to the desire to embed within them to allow yourself to cry. Even as men now, I'm like, cry it out if you need to, not necessarily that they do or they're saying, okay, thanks, I need your permission, mom, but I keep reflecting and reminding them that that is part of your strength, because then you move the energy, you allow the emotion to do what it's there to do in the first place, and then you can move forward in whatever situation you might find yourself.
Yeah, and then if you don't cry, it just bottles up, and then all of a sudden you need to go, your your life is falling apart, and the process of letting it all out is a lot harder when you have to let out 20 years of cries
Yeah.
than, because you
Yeah.
literally have to sit there and there's ways to fast forward and there's breath work and all this stuff, but ultimately you end up crying. So
Yeah, you got to
I
get, you
lost,
just, when is the question? When are you going to let it out? Yeah.
yeah, I lost my son in 2014, and that was one of my premonition. I had my son from a premonition dream, and I lost him from a premonition dream. I dreamt the whole thing in advance both times, and I got to meet my new sons. I got to meet because my dead son introduced me to them and talked me into having my sons in my dreams. So I would never have the life that I have if it wasn't for my intuition and my inner world, because I was on a very different path in my life. I was on the material, physical, especially I was very spiritual, but let's party, let's have a good time, let's have a bunch of sex. I was gay guy, in my 20s, and all of a sudden there was like an intervention from my soul that said, "Hey, this is what's coming, and we'll make it really easy for you. You just have to follow the steps that we'll show you."
Hmm.
But and then 4 years later, that same steps of having my son, which also brought on a daughter because I had adopted his sister, who was my goddaughter at the time. Um, then two, my best friend, who was the mother, and my son died in a car crash. But I got to see that in advance, which thank God, because oh my God, losing a child and thinking it was just an accident or any losing your child in any way. But if you think it's an accident or whether it's not, whatever it is, you always go through the what ifs. What if
Yeah.
I should have done that? What if I did that? But when you see it in advance multiple times before the death,
Mhm.
it's a it's very soothing because not to say it eased it, but it made me feel comforted that it was meant to be and things are as they should be, and really acknowledge the journey of the soul, whether it's for a 4-year-old or a longer
Mhm.
life. But what the reason that I want to say this, even with that kind of knowledge and
Yeah.
knowing that everything was okay, I was in pain. I couldn't breathe.
Mm.
I would stare at the TV for like 2 hours and realize that it was off. I
Mm.
was hyperventilating. I just didn't know what the heck to do. And I remember like some people would try to calm me down, and my instincts were to cry. And I would take, I mean, because I had to go back to work pretty early, because unless you could take a year off, it's pretty early. I was 6 weeks in, or I had to go back to school the next week. I was in my finals and I had just getting into UCLA, my dream school, the day after my son died, and I had to get my finals at my college. I need to get my A's to still get into UCLA. It was a mess. But I
Mhm.
remember every time the tears would come up, I would just have to release it. I would leave any area that I was, say,
Yeah.
"Hey, sorry, I gotta go cry." And then I would go cry my eyes out until I had nothing left. And when you're done crying, because it's not a permanent
Mhm.
thing. There is an end when you allow yourself to cry. And then you
Yes.
come back, you live life, and then the cry fits happen again. And I think, probably one of the reasons why I'm so healed from this journey is not only because I, followed my life purpose and feel that everything happens for a reason, but it's because I allowed my physical emotions to be processed. So I don't have a lot of triggers. I have triggers about the stupidest things, but you could talk about my dead son all day long and I won't get triggered, which is really, because I process that. That is a big thing you process. Someone getting
Yeah.
on your nerves, you don't necessarily process.
Wow, yes. Well, thank you for sharing so openly about that. And I think that, it speaks a lot to perspective when you do feel or know that everything happens for a reason beyond the conscious mind. And also, as you've spoken about, beyond the physical experience, which will include the grieving, which will include the feelings and the emotions as we heal and process, but understanding that your son is still there in a different way, a different form, and you're still connected, which is, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, well, I wish he would visit more, just a tad bit.
Yeah.
He stopped. He was there with me every day almost until my twins were. He guided me. Like it almost was like he made sure I had the twins, and then as soon as they came into my life, I didn't feel him as much anymore. He didn't come into my dreams, but it also means that my focus was on a different frequency.
Yeah.
So it could be the chicken or the egg or it does. We don't know what the reason is. And
Mm.
also there's a point where you have to let go of the past. I never let go of him. His birthday's coming up. But
Yeah.
the cool thing is this is kind of a fun fact. Well, a happy fact is what I call them. It's pseudoscience. He came to me like a couple of weeks, maybe a week after he died, and he said, "Daddy," because he was 4.5, "Daddy, and he said this in a really cool way. He was narrating the dream. It wasn't like I could, because usually he speaks in the dream. But he said, "Daddy, from now on, when you want to talk to me, when you want to communicate with me, think of me as someone in their prime, like 34, not 4, because my soul is always at its prime and my body was just young. So to
Wow.
continue
Beautiful.
our communication, don't look for a baby anymore."
Mm.
And so now, like at the last dream I had of him was a year ago, or God, I'm getting old because I'm not sure if it was last November or the November before that, but I hope it was last November. I think it was 2 Novembers ago. I hope it was last one. Anyway, so I saw him and he was a young man, and
Mm.
it was really cool because he would come and it was the longest dream. He would come and we would hang out and just talk,
Yeah.
and he'd say, "I have to be right." I'll be right back. I have to go. And you know, when in your dream somebody goes, they're never coming back. But he would come back. It was
Yeah.
almost like he was doing some other stuff and he would come back and would
Mm,
continue the conversation for a long time. And
beautiful.
I remember having this grown man on my, like on my lap and just petting his hair as we're talking. And I remember it was so cool. Um,
Mm,
he was
I
like,
could feel
Daddy,
that. That's so beautiful.
he was like, Daddy, or he still just said Daddy. He's like, Daddy, can you tell me about my life on Earth? Because it was such a blip that
Mm,
it's like it's fuzzy. Can you tell me the details? And he would have me go over the details because he was like, it was a blip. And I
mm,
would be like, this is what we did, and this is what we did. And he sat there like in amazement, like, thank you for sharing that with me. And you think the spirit would know all this stuff. But
yeah,
then when you think about it, if it's a millisecond of their experience, and for me, it's such a big thing, he just wanted my perspective. And,
yeah.
he'd go away and he'd come back and we just hug and just hug. And it was
That's so beautiful.
the longest dream. And then I went to see John Edwards, who's a famous psychic medium, and he picked me out of the crowd and said, "Whose son died in a car accident?" And I said, "Me." And you had to be in that row. You can't just be like me, anyone in the audience, because there's like thousands of people there, and he has to pick the row, pick there, and say on that side of the row whose son died in a car accident. And I said, "Me." He said, "Well, he just wants to let you know that he's not young anymore. He's a grown person." I was like, "Tell me something I don't know, please," because I just spent like a whole day with him.
You just had a
So
whole dream and then it was all clear.
yeah.
Yeah.
But he
Well, I
also
do
does.
have,
Oh,
yeah, go
sorry,
for it.
but he visits me in my body when I'm in my physical life too. So that's also intuition.
Yeah.
That's having a not logical experience. Okay, sorry. Moving
Yes.
on to the next question.
Well, the question actually is linked to that because, when I talk about intuition and I relate to yours, and I've had some really beautiful conversations about this because I teach intuition in the sound healing work that I do. So that, yes, there's science, there's understanding frequency, that we're energy, and all of these beautiful things in science. And then there's intuition. You're working with someone or you're working with yourself in your energy field and something's coming through. And we talk about those spaces. However, there's also communication with spirit, which you're describing very beautifully with your communication with passed on relatives or others, and so on and so forth. So I'd love if you could talk to that. Is there a differentiation for you between your intuition and talking to spirit? Can you speak to that a little? Because I for me, it's not exactly the same thing, and I'd love to know your take on it.
Well, the thing is, there's a well of knowledge inside us that we have access to. So tapping in is our intuitive ability to tap into the inner worlds. What you choose to tap into is very specific to you, and you have to have a reason. So it's really important to understand that unless you're super skilled, but even then, um, your desire and need, and more need than desire,
Mhm.
dominates your frequency. So if there's a need, speak to spirit, for example, and there's an actual, and then you can tune into that frequency, then you'll receive some sort of communication that's easier to access. But if you're just doing things for fun, unless you're like really grounded in your life, you've already practiced a lot,
Yeah.
the fun aspect doesn't come as easily. Now, when I say need, it's a need is a strong desire, but it has to come from a positive frequency because, the dead, unless you're talking about like thought forms of leftovers of the dead, which is not really their soul, you can communicate with anything left over in your room, if you just tap into its frequency. But if you're trying to tap into your soul frequency or of someone, you have to tap into something that resonates on their frequency, on their
Mhm.
level. And me being a father of a child, my DNA resonates on that frequency. But when you know someone that dies, they're a touchstone on the other side because you can tap into their frequency. But you have to
Mm.
tap into their love, kind of, not into their sadness and all the issues that they had. You have to tap
Yeah.
into your connection, and when you do that, then you can have a clearer connection. And sometimes people are just there, I just got goosebumps, or oh, I was just walking around, all of a sudden I started thinking about this person. And sometimes that just means you're connecting. And that's the best way you know how to translate.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
dreams are really a good way to know is like when you're dreaming about the dead, they're usually in their prime. they have this glowy feel to their skin, and they just look very radiant. That's how
Mm.
I know the difference between when I have communication dreams with my grandma, for example, who died at an older age, or whether it's just me having a dream of her. Because it's really important. You know the difference between a soul
Mm.
visit and a dream. Because dreams, we have dreams that process our daily lives and clean out the subconscious and categorize stuff and tell you how your mood is during the week and the day or where you're at. There's those, and there's connection dreams. And when you do that, you feel their essence. And when you feel it, you know it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's usually, there's not really, when you have some sort of a connection with something from the other side, I don't think you question it. It's like, oh, okay. You can't
Mm.
explain it, you can't prove it, but you know it.
Mm.
Like I've had so many different versions of communication, but when you
Sure.
tap into other frequencies, something I called resourcing, um, you have a question that you want an answer to. And I would not even try to tune into a specific frequency as an ans as a resource, unless you have made some sort of connection with your a guide that you have or some sort of force. If you made a connection, then they can be the conduit of the
Mm.
answer. They could find the messages or the answers. But sometimes I just send it out and say, whoever is the best energy to answer
Yeah.
this question, that's who I want and to answer this question. And I'm very open to where it comes from, as long as the intentions are pure for the greater good and the
Mm.
frequency is higher or the same as where I am.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
never, I mean, you never want to say, because there's intelligence out there. There's people out there. You could tune into some weirdo's frequency that's living next door. You always want to set your intentions,
Yeah.
clear yourself, make sure you're in a good space, and then you tap in if you're trying to get big answers, you know? If you're just trying to get quick gut intuition or stuff, that's different. But if you're trying to tune into frequency, whether it's your, guardian angels, as some people call it, or spirit guides, or dead
Yeah.
relatives, you
Yeah.
have to set the intention and be very clear about it. Did that
Yes.
even
Yes.
remotely answer your question?
Yes, you know
Okay.
what? There's so many nuggets that I want to pull from. So I want to ask you about, just kind of backtracking slightly. You were using AI as an example, which I really like. That I had someone that I was speaking to on an earlier episode in my podcast talking about quantum intelligence and that source of that resource field. And so we have a new QI instead of AI happening, which is really tapping into that, the resource and the energy source that's available with all the information for us to pull from. I want to know from you, because you've got children. I mean, I don't know how old your twins are. I know your son passed at 4. Mine are much older now. Very much, there's social media, there is internet, there's all the technology where we are bombarded by so much stimuli. I mean, so much that I wonder if you could give a few tips on how people can go within with all of that stuff happening on the outside. Because I think it's
Well,
so prominent.
it's so important to know.
Yeah.
My sons are 7.5, and my daughter is 18. She just moved away to yesterday to go to college.
Beautiful.
But she didn't. So I really think that it's the overflow of information. First of all, our attention spans are so tiny now, and our mind is in super high beta, which is insane. Because then we're just going through whatever's entertaining us fastest. And
Mhm.
there's so many other aspects that I can't even get into, that I wouldn't call a problem. I would call it the next catalyst for the next evolution of our mind, because there's a point where all this, anything new that comes, it'll eventually like have some backlash. But right now what's happening is that attention spans are getting smaller and shorter, and people are complaining about, oh no, people have no attention span anymore. Like
Mm.
spiritual people are saying people don't have attention spans anymore. But at the same time, those same spiritual people kept talking about how time is speeding up. Have you heard of that? Time is speeding up because of the
Mhm.
times. Time is speeding up. Songs are going to be 2 minutes now instead of 6 minutes. So there is a physical representation of time speeding up. Everything is faster. But the problem with social media is not different than the problem with all the people that are in our lives. There are more people in and influences in our lives than ever before, unless you're someone who's not really social, because we have access to so much. I mean, I live in a big city, so there's people everywhere. So you
Mhm.
have to practice discernment. And the way you do that is you have to figure out who you are, what your intention is in this world is, what you want your dominant frequency to be, and what you want your life to be like. So if you set those, intentions in advance, you vibrate on a very unique frequency. So if you're going through social media or people are sending you stuff randomly, you will
Mhm.
be able to intuitively discern if that thing is for you or not, and you will have better discernment. The filtration system is more powerful. Because for me, when people say I don't do social media, it just makes me think of someone who was like, I'm not going to drive a car. I love horses. When the cars came out, it's like, I don't think it's healthy, but you have to be grounded. But I think you have to go through the unhealthy before you come up with a cure to fix it. So I think everything has to go through its ebbs and flows. So
Mhm.
right now for my daughter, I can't control her in any way, but luckily she's pretty grounded. But I'm starting to see her photos and her thirst traps and stuff, and and I'm just trying to be very neutral about it
Yeah.
because this is her experience, and when you have children, you have to really respect their experience and know that they don't come from the same world as you. Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how old you are, but I'm 46, so I got to see the world, and I came from a third world country. So I got to have a black and white TV, and music was illegal because we were in the middle of an Islamic war or whatever it was. And I came from a different world, and then and I've seen analog, one phone per house, all the way to right now we have three phones in our house, and we have
Mhm.
Alexa and Google and Siri.
Mhm.
So you have to understand, like, we can't superimpose our ideals of what life was like. Of course, social interactions were amazing before the internet. I
Yeah.
mean, there was something that it was so raw and authentic, but then the accessibility of what we have, of now is so amazing. So there's always pros and cons, but our generation got to live the both, and we're the
Mhm.
very, I don't know, I'm gonna guess you're somewhere around my age.
Yeah,
Um,
just a few years older. Yeah.
but our generation was the lucky generation that got to experience both sides of the coin, and
Yeah.
that's very cool, but it doesn't make
I
it
think so.
better. But
Yeah.
my children are going to be like, oh my God, once upon a time you got to hold the phone in your hand,
Yeah,
and it was just chip in your brain or whatever it is now it's going to be then.
exactly.
So
But isn't
everybody
it
has
the
their
same
own.
with our parents, right? The things that
Yeah,
our
the
parents would have been.
radio.
I mean, so I completely I remember the first computer in our house and the dial-up and all the stuff that looks like ancient stuff to our generation, or the cassette recorders and things like that. So yeah, for sure. And I do love that it is that neutral place where you also recognize that those souls have come through you to help you grow and learn as well, while you're as parents to guide and offer your protection and support and all of those in the world and so on. They're there to teach you, and boy do I learn from my children, and
I
I
love it.
love that. I just so love it. I feel so blessed to learn from a different generation.
Oh, it's amazing. It's why I stay so young all the time. Like I feel like I'm a little kid.
Yeah.
But I always love learning new stuff anyway, and I'm not someone who lingers in the past so much. I always
Mm,
keep going forward.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but to what you were saying, it's really not money that's evil. It's not social media that's evil. It's not anything. If you ground yourself and know who you are and know what your intentions are, even social media is its own, like it has a built-in law of attraction, the algorithm. It knows what you like and it will bring it to you. It's literally the law of attraction in a phone. And it says, oh, you like comedy? I'll show you more comedy. So find stuff that you like. You do get people that send you stuff that are on the wrong frequency for you.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
people send me warning stuff all the time. They're like, oh my God, there's salmonella poisoning going on in 17 states. And I'm like, is it happening in my house? Because if it's not, I don't give a crap. And when you think about it, and I talk about law of attraction, I'm like, listen, if I don't get those videos, then I'm not gonna get salmonella poisoning. So leave me alone. And then the next day I get another one and another one. And it's almost like that's their language, their love language. They want to take care of you and be, make you feel safe. Or
Yeah,
people think that, there's certain things, people have different humor, but you have to
yeah,
discern, put your
yes,
foot
for sure.
down, because the algorithm is at least the algorithm and knows what you want.
Mm,
But
mm.
your friends who are scrolling in the middle of the night and sending you stuff all the time, they are not controlled.
You're
But
not the
but
algorithm.
that's where you have to create boundaries,
For sure.
whether it's with the energetic world or the physical world. If you do not have clear boundaries, and you can only have clear boundaries if you go within and understand who you are and have the understanding and awareness of who you want to be.
Yeah,
Because who you want to be is extremely important, because you might not be the best version of yourself now, but who you want to be needs to be the blueprint of who you are and who
mm,
you resonate. And that then you become resonating, and then you start resonating with that. And that's what you are drawn to. And that's what you're more likely to be defensive about and say, hey, this is my boundary. You are crossing my boundaries right now.
yeah,
And therefore, whether it's a computer doing it, people doing it, or a little ghost in the house. I mean, I don't even believe in like traditional ghosts, but or negative energy in the house doing it. You know your boundaries, and no one can cross those lines if you are not willing to uh, compromise who you are.
yeah, yeah. And I like the neutrality in that because it then shifts the perspective really matters. My mom always used to say that when I was growing up, you can give someone a knife and that person can stab someone next door or they can put butter on their toast. The knife isn't good or bad. It's whoever's wielding the tool and the perspective and the intention. And I think that's it. Like you said, my relationship with social media is very much, I love using social media for business. It's nice every now and then to connect, but I don't want to be on a device scrolling all the time. I much rather be in meditation, or I much rather hang out with my kids or my family. And so it's something that I use that works for me. And I also know many people who feel like they spend so much of their day in that you said, so distracted in the scroll, I call it, and it's constant. And then that kind of inner voice gets muted because of all of the stuff going on the outside. And I'd love to talk about that inner voice piece because when I talk about intuition, someone said to me, yeah, okay, well, something comes up. And then I'm like, well, how do I know this is real or this is really my intuition? That question comes up a lot when I'm working and teaching this in that space. And my reframe tends to be, well, what if it is? Or it doesn't matter if it's right or not right, because that's not the goal. It's just information. What resonates? And these are the ways that I kind of approach it. I'd love to know more about yours. Someone says, look, how do I know that this is actually my intuition that I'm sensing into? Or I don't know, something else,
Well, in the very beginning, who gives a crap? Because you're
right?
just learning how to communicate with your or have an ear, like to
Mm-hmm.
listen. You're perking up your ear so you can hear.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter. You're just getting information. I don't care if right now if I'm trying to see something, if I see something dark or light. If I'm working
That's
on my
it.
inner sight, I don't give a crap what I see. If I see like a demon or whether I see an angel, I'll be like, yay! It's not
I'm
like I'm inviting
seeing.
them into my life. I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So first of all, that's that. And then another thing with it is it helpful? Is it helping you? If you're not
Mm-hmm.
sure if it's made up or real, if it's helpful and it's something that's gonna not divide you or make you act out of fear, or it inspires you and it just adds more to your life and it makes your life rich, who cares where it comes from? You're
Yeah.
one with the universe anyway. You are tapped in. It's like a web that you're attached to every aspect of the universe. So you're never really your own thoughts anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So who gives a crap? Is what you're thinking and receiving helpful or not?
Yeah.
Period. Now, if
So
it's
plain
telling
and
you to
straightforward.
get, yeah, but it has, I talk about this a lot and I mentioned in my book, you got to be aware of your biases though. because
Mm.
biases will color intuition. Now, there's an entire chapter devoted to misinterpretation. So
Mhm.
it's really important, and I, without going too much into detail, because it is one of the most important chapters, and I don't want to just refer to the book because I like to teach.
Mhm.
Misinterpretation is when you're tapped in and you're tuned in and you're receiving, let's say, from like the most incredible resource in the world, but you're misinterpreting it because you have biases, you have issues, you have intentions, and you will take that information and you will twist it and turn it into whatever it is you want it to say. And that's where a lot of times I don't trust psychics or other people who do readings or anything because I don't know what their intentions are. Are their intentions to make money? Are their intentions to be right? Are their intentions to help me? So it's really different. So I always have to know the intention, and everybody's biased.
Mm.
Everybody is. You just want to
Of
get the
course.
minimal amount of misinterpretation. You will always misinterpret.
Yes.
So there is no such thing as a pure channeled material. It's always colored by the lens of you. So
Mm.
yeah, even people are like, oh, I just had to get out of the way and it came through. It's still you talking with using
Yeah.
your vocabulary. So it's really important to understand that you are for sure receiving information and your biases are going to influence it. So be aware of your biases whenever you get this big download. And are you just, have you been suffocated for so long that now you're getting this download that you have to start a new career? Is it because this download's telling you that you need to get away from your situation? Or are you just thinking that, oh, I like doing that and now this is my career that I need to follow? You know what I
Mm.
mean? You got to see
Yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
if you're suffocating. So here's a really good important one. If you're in survival mode right now, which means that you're just basically like having a really hard time of making ends meet, not financially, but emotionally, both of them, and your living situation, whatever it is, your home situation, if it's off and you're in survival mode,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the purest source of intuition that you're going to get, but you will get information, which is kind of intuition, but a different intuition. And there's labels for it, which I will not give because I want to stay away from labels. That is basically pulling out, keeping you safe
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that you're alive. But it'll pull you out of the situation with enough drive because it'll dangle a carrot in front of you to get out of that situation. But once you get out of that situation, it's really important to know that now you're not in survival mode anymore. And that carrot might just disappear. It might have just been a mirage just to get you to keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get to where you're going, then a new carrot will show up that might be the gold. So so that's why you got to continue to check in because the information you have internally is real time. It is not something that, okay, so my inner self said I had to start a grocery business or a pastry business or whatever. And it was enough motivation to get you out of there. But once you got out of there, your intuition might not be like, okay, now we got your attention. Now you really need to start a factory that's blah, 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 blah.
Mm.
Something completely different. So just be aware in the real time aspect. And that's why
Yeah.
checking in is important and see if you still resonate with that idea once you've become the newer version of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the newer version of you most likely will not resonate with old ideas.
Yeah. And I think that in that connection with spirit and communication, it's the same. Spirit does communicate in a way that you will understand through your lens of experience, your vocabulary, like you said, whether it's like, oh, this film or this song or things that you can make sense of in order to translate the frequency or energy coming through. So yeah, I like that. And I often, when people ask me these questions about, well, how do you know this or that, or how can you be sure? It's like, you know what? I'm not in the business of convincing. It's an inner question, and the answer that comes for you right now is right for you. And then you go with that, and then you keep going with that, and you keep going within. There's no judgment, you
Yeah,
know.
can I talk about something really cool?
Yes, please.
Because I just like throwing stuff out to the audience so they can suck it up. Um,
Yes.
Sometimes you get a song stuck in your head and you don't know why that song's stuck in your head. Fine, read the lyrics, go look it up. Like that's a really good one because your subconscious
Yeah.
has all these songs stored. It's like a data library if you have somebody who's listened to songs. And sometimes when you're just so clueless and running around the world and not listening, it'll put a song in your head and you'll when you read the lyrics, you're like, "Holy crap.
Yeah.
Like this is my life precisely." Like my grandma when right when she died, she put a song in my head and
Mhm.
the song is explained her time of death, like why she had to die now and everything. And I would
Wow.
have never gotten it so well. But if it's already written, somebody would have been like, well, that's just song stuck in your head. I said,
Mm.
well, it's the most perfect song. And it was
Yeah.
in a different language. It's in my mother tongue, which is Farsi. And it's not what I normally think. But songs,
Mhm.
I have like pop songs that pop in my head. They're like
Mhm.
Madonna songs, or because I'm a Madonna fan, or other stuff. But this one was a very specific song that was in a different language, and I had to go. I didn't know the lyrics. I only know the chorus, but my subconscious knew the lyrics. So I had
Mm.
to look up the song, see what it meant, and then message from grandma in the most
Mm.
unorthodox way.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just noticing. There is a noticing and an awareness in that. So it doesn't just be like, why is the song stuck in my head? And then you just bypass it and keep going, right? There is a pause and that check-in that you're referring to that allows us to sense into the, I don't know, signs and symbols and dreams and all the amazing things that we have access to.
Now, when I said that, I mean when a song that's not popular on the radio pops in your head, okay? If it's popular and it's sitting, it's in the atmosphere already.
Of
So
course.
it's already in the loop. So you are still picking that up.
Yeah.
Another reason why people get so obsessed with a song is because it gets thrown in the atmosphere, kind of, because it was just freshly received or there's so much thing on it. And then when a bunch of people think about it, it's in the energetic atmosphere and people just cling to it, and it's in
Yeah.
there and in everybody's head. And once they hear it, they resonate with it because guess what? It was already in their head before they even heard it to begin with.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
intuitively, we heard the song before
Yeah.
some of the
Yeah.
big songs, and
Yeah.
then you hear it, you resonate with it, and you're like, whoa, that's my new favorite song.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had experiences where I might be co-writing or collaborating sonically with someone, and we're working virtually, and we have some lyrics, and we're like, okay, well, let's just see what we come up with, and the same melody on a few phrases, almost like identical. It's like, okay, we're obviously tapping into the same frequency here. We're going somewhere with
Awesome.
this. And these are really interesting, and I'm really grateful in those noticings. So that's incredible. But Ali, I can be happy. I want to say Ali, happy I can speak
I
to
know
you
it's
all
it's
day.
it's the curse. Everyone always says
No,
that, especially if you're from the UK.
really.
Yeah,
Oh,
because you have a lot of alleys there, right?
we do, we do. I have
Yeah.
one of dear friend of mine, is Ali as well.
Yes.
So he's yeah, bless him. But happy, and I'm so happy to have this conversation with you. And I really just want to honor you and celebrate the work you're doing to help us tap into that inner wisdom because it's so important, especially as we are in this time that I feel is very much we're awakening to so much more than we have before. And it's so important to check in, look within, and I just want to celebrate you and all the work you're doing because
Thank you
it's
so
it's so
much.
amazing and amazing with your book. Congrats on that. And I really hope that our listeners go out and pick that up. And I will of course put all of the links and all of your amazing work for people to check out as well. Um, Before
Thank
we
you.
wrap up, though, I love to ask everyone this final question, Happy, and that is, what is your soulful sound to the world? And that's a prayer or desire that you wish upon the world.
Well, I don't want to be cheesy and give the usual prayers or what I want the world to hear, but I do want to share something that I think that everyone should hear. And that is not what I intended to say originally when you told me you were going to
Beautiful.
ask me this question. Uh, I teach about tapping in, and I teach about going within, and I teach endless techniques on how to receive information. And it feels like, okay, well, then this person who's taught it and teaches it and reads I have classes that I teach, group coachings that I teach. I do all this stuff and I've mastered it. That person should know and should always have full access to all this stuff, right? And the answer is, even though that we're connected to so much and we're never alone, And there's not a moment in this world that you're not supported fully by all the non-physical energies that are here to uplift you, to guide you, and to basically hold your hand as much as you're willing to let them. You're not always in a place where you're going to receive information.
Mm.
And even somebody who's amazing at it will go through ebbs and flows. Like right now, I can't dream worth crap. Like I literally can't. I remember my dream last night for the first time in 3 weeks because there's a lot on my mind. So there are, or I'm having my first human, like almost like drama, I would say. Like I don't have drama in my life. I felt like I had risen above all this and I was living in this ethereal world, but then my creativity got so crappy that I asked the universe for just a hint of drama, without it being too heavy because I need to produce and create. So that I'm having a little bit of human drama. So it's easy to judge yourself and say, hey, I might not be good enough at this, or I might not be able to ever do this, or I thought I was having progress and now I'm not. The
Mm.
greatest of the greats, the greatest, will have writer's block, will have momentary, like just, their brain will just freeze and intuition just goes away. It's because that's your process at that moment. And there's something else you need to be paying attention to. Your
Mm.
inner world and all these other things, if you're an artist, your songs, they only are coming when everything is kind of the way that it's supposed to be. And then now it's time for the music to come through. So don't
Mm.
be discouraged at all if you have some success and then you go backwards, because that has been happening to me in my whole life. But I keep going forward when you look back at it. And then I didn't, then you realize, oh, holy mother of Christ. I'm like, what? I have, look at how far I've come. But the
Yeah.
process, I just felt like I was just like doing loops, and every time there's like this huge thing and happiness, some tragedy happens, and then some good thing happens, and tragedy happens, some good things. So don't get discouraged. Don't judge yourself. Just know that you're here to live, and the only people that have a bad time are the ones who end up judging the process or judging that they're judging. So just live life knowing that there is no, you're here for the fun, you're here for the experience, and sometimes it's just not fun.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that,
Beautiful.
because
Thank
I
you.
felt like that was more relevant than some poetic thing that I could say.
Yeah, well, all from the heart and aligned, and we really appreciate that. Happy, thank you. Thank you for being here, for your presence and sharing and wisdom, and just so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Your support, your comments, and everything is truly incredible, and we're only at the beginning of this awesome journey together. If you love this episode, hit that like and subscribe button and make sure to check out our other episodes. Thanks so much for being with us today, sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are.